Well, that breaking news that's just coming in, being confirmed by our partners NBC News in the United States, that the Reverend Jesse Jackson, a towering figure of the US civil rights movement, has died at the age of 84. It's been announced that Reverend Jesse Jackson passed away peacefully in Chicago. His family say surrounded by loved ones. Now, Jesse Jackson's career spanned at least 7 decades, going all the way back to the late 50s, early 1960s, when he was a protege of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He worked all the way through the 60s and 70s civil rights movements, those bus boycotts, those marches in Salem and other places, as he fought for black people in America to have the same rights as their white counterparts. Remember, this was a time when Jesse Jackson was working in those early days where there was effective segregation in the southern states of the United States. Black people weren't able to access schooling. Black people weren't even able to go to the same restaurants as white people. Black people had to sit on the back of buses. Reverend Jesse Jackson, along with people like Martin Luther King and others, fought for those changes, and the Reverend Jesse Jackson fought for those changes all the way through his career, passing away peacefully, we are told, at his home in Chicago earlier today. He was 84. He also came to greater national prominence in the 1980s. He ran twice unsuccessfully to be the Democratic nominee for president, once in 1984, and then perhaps more memorably, certainly for me anyway, in 1988, where he, for many people, stood out as a candidate whose perhaps time had come. There would be a black candidate put forward by the Democratic Party for president. Of course, that did not come to pass, and it was another over 15 years until the Democrats were able to put a black candidate forward for president. That man was Barack Obama, who, of course, went on to become president in 2008, historically. Now, Jesse Jackson's also known for his diplomacy, his international diplomacy. He worked for the release of US hostages in Syria. That was back in 1984, as well as in Cuba in the same year, as well as hostages held in Iraq in 1990 and people held in Yugoslavia back in 1999. He also served as the shadow US Senator for the District of Columbia, lobbying for statehood for the District of Columbia. He was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the highest honor in the United States, by President Bill Clinton for his works in the civil rights movement, as well as his humanitarian works. He was given that in the year 2000. So the Reverend Jesse Jackson, 84 years old, passed away peacefully today in Chicago, the 17th of February. He was 84, and his family say he passed away peacefully while at home, surrounded by his loved ones. Now, with a man of the Reverend Jesse Jackson's age, of course, there are and have been issues with his health in recent years, and it was back in 2017 that he was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. That condition was confirmed back in April of 2025, and it progressed fairly rapidly, that he had a progressive supranuclear palsy, PSP, which is known as a very rare but very aggressive neurodegenerative disorder. It's reported that he was hospitalized in November of 2025 in relation to PSP, but then was discharged in December of 2025 to the care of his family in an acute care facility where he would continue his recovery. It's reported, though, that he did pass away peacefully. He was surrounded by those that loved him. He was 84 and will be looked upon as not only a giant of the civil rights movement, but a giant of US politics, a man who, through his drive, through his determination, through his resolve, was able to pave the way for many of the black politicians who came after. This is a man who went for president, for the Democratic nominee for president twice, in 1984 and 1988, memorably in 1988. And it's hard to imagine that without Jesse Jackson being a trailblazer in that regard, that we would perhaps have, in a few years later, in 2008, Barack Obama as the first and only at this stage, black president of the United States of America. I've got a statement here from the Reverend Jesse Jackson's family, which has just arrived to us here at Sky News. I'm going to read it out to you in full. And it reads, "It is with profound sadness that we announce the passing of civil rights leader and founder of the Rainbow Push Coalition, the Honourable Reverend Jesse Jackson Sr. He died peacefully on Tuesday morning, surrounded by his family. His unwavering commitment to justice, equality and human rights helped shape a global movement for freedom and dignity. A tireless change agent, he elevated the voices of the voiceless from his presidential campaigns in the 1980s to mobilising millions to register to vote, leaving an indelible mark on history." The Reverend Jesse Jackson is survived by his family, Jacqueline, their children, Santita, Jesse Jr., Jonathan, Yusuf, Jacqueline, daughter Ashley Jackson, and grandchildren. He was preceded in death by his mother, Helen Burns Jackson, his father, Noah Louis Robinson, and stepfather, Charles Henry Jackson. They go on. "Our father was a servant leader, not only to our family, but to the oppressed, the voiceless, and the overlooked around the world. We shared him with the world, and in return, the world became part of our extended family. His unwavering belief in justice, equality, and love uplifted millions, and we ask you to honour his memory by continuing the fight for the values he lived in." They then go on to tell us that there will be some public observances held in Chicago. Final arrangements are to be made to celebrate the life of the Reverend Jesse Jackson, who, at the age of 84, has passed away peacefully, his family tell us, at home in Chicago, surrounded by loved ones. We are looking here at a photograph of the Reverend Jesse Jackson in the 80s with President of the United States, Ronald Reagan, at a time when high-profile politicians who were black of his stature really didn't exist. Jesse Jackson was a person who led the way for many of the black politicians in the United States who would come after him. And he's a man who learnt from being a protege of the great civil rights leader, Dr. Martin Luther King. He continued his work in civil rights and human rights since the early days of that civil rights movement in the United States, starting in the late 50s and early 60s, learning from Dr. Martin Luther King, who, of course, was the architect of this idea of nonviolence, of working together, of seeing a person's humanity. And the Reverend Jesse Jackson learnt from that and helped to overturn the rank racist segregation that was endemic in the southern United States in those days, once the Civil Rights Act was passed, signed into law by Lyndon Johnson in the 1960s. The Reverend Jesse Jackson continued to fight for civil rights and for human rights in the United States, and more broadly. It's reported that he was working to try and free Americans who had been held in prisons all over the world. He was an international diplomat as well as being a US politician, a statesman who was negotiating the release of American hostages and people who were held in countries all over the world. Just a few of them. He negotiated the release of prisoners who were being held in Syria. That was back in 1984. He also negotiated the release of prisoners who were held in Cuba in the 80s as well as in Iraq and in Yugoslavia in 1999. Now, here he is pictured, as we say, with the President of the US, Ronald Reagan, and it was in the 1980s, can't tell you exactly when this picture was taken, but it was in the 1980s that the Reverend Jesse Jackson ran for president. He wanted to get the Democratic nomination for president, and he went for that twice, in 1984 and 1988. And it was a time when the idea of a black person being president in the United States was far from the minds of people, only 20 years since some of those racist Jim Crow laws had been lifted in the southern United States, since black people were given equal rights through the Civil Rights Act, since black people were able to go to schools with their white counterparts, able to eat in the same restaurants as white counterparts, given the vote in the same way as their white counterparts. The United States here in the 80s had only been about 20 or so years on from those Jim Crow laws, from that racist segregation. So the idea of a black person becoming president for many people in America was a dream. And it wasn't until, of course, 2008, with the election of Barack Obama, that the United States did manage to achieve that dream. Barack Obama, of course, serving 2 terms from 2008 up to 2015. So the Reverend Jesse Jackson, who has passed away at the age of 84, his family have put out a statement, which I'm going to read a little bit of and give you a bit more detail as to how they, at this moment, are celebrating the passing of the leader of their family. So they write, it's a Jackson family statement, and it's come from Chicago, where he died just a short time ago. It is with profound sadness that we announce the passing of the civil rights leader and founder of the Rainbow Push Coalition, the Honourable Jesse Jackson Sr. He died peacefully on Tuesday morning, surrounded by his family. His unwavering commitment to justice and human rights helped shape a global movement for freedom and dignity, and became a voice for the voiceless, a tireless change agent. He elevated the voices of the voiceless and went on to do that throughout his career. Reverend Jesse Jackson, who, as I said, had run for president twice in 1984 and 1988, continued his work as a civil rights leader and a person calling for human rights, the dignity of every human person in the United States, regardless of their colour, all the way through his life. But it was in his later years, and back in 2017, that he was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. That disease progressed, and it was later, in April of 2025, diagnosed as progressive supranuclear palsy, PSP. It's known as a rare and aggressive neurodegenerative disorder. He was taken into hospital as a result of that in November of 2025, and then discharged to an acute care facility in December of 2025. He officially, at that point, stepped down from this organisation known as the Rainbow Push Coalition, and that is an organisation that was founded by the Reverend Jesse Jackson, who led the group 52 years, starting it in 1971. It is an organisation that is headquartered in the US city of Chicago. Its mission is to organise, to get people involved in democracy, and to push for social justice. It grew out of, in fact, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, which was founded by Dr. Martin Luther King. And in 1966, Dr. King appointed Jesse Jackson Sr. to serve as the first director of what was known as Operation Breadbasket. That was in Chicago. Now, a few years later, in 1971, the Rainbow Push Coalition was founded as social justice movements. Other civil rights groups were merged, and Reverend Jesse Jackson served as the head of that organisation that was dedicated throughout those years, from 1971 up to this very day, in improving the economic conditions of black communities across the United States. In the 70s, it expanded into areas of social and political development using direct action campaigns, as well as radio broadcasts and awards, and that honoured prominent black people in the United States and abroad. Of course, this is something that came out of Chicago. It's where Reverend Jesse Jackson came out of, where he passed away. And of course, the same city where America's first black president came from as well, Barack Obama. Well, let's bring in now Lord Simon Woolley, who I'm very pleased to say has joined us now live. Lord Woolley, good morning to you and thank you for being with us. Please reflect for us, if you can, on the life of the Reverend Jesse Jackson, who has passed away today.
Well, I just got a call about 10 minutes ago from your team, and I must say that I'm heartbroken and crestfallen to have lost a very dear friend, a mentor, and as you've been saying, an icon of social and racial justice. We spoke just before Christmas with his daughter Jacqueline. He had difficulty speaking, but I said to him that I am me right now, head of Oxbridge College and all the rest of it, in no small measure because of you, my friend. He changed so many people's lives. He changed so many institutions. His legacy will live forever. And I'm an embodiment of someone who, he put his arm on my shoulder, my brother Woolley. If Dr. Martin Luther King was alive, you'd be in his team. We're going to do great things together. And we did, as a matter of fact. When he first came to London to be alongside me, registering literally tens of thousands of people to vote, together we transformed Westminster to the way that it looks today, to the institutions such as the Race Disparity Unit and the black and brown faces that now sit on the green benches. Is because of our collective work. And you know, when I started here at Cambridge University, at Homerton College, one of the first things I was able to do was to honor my mentor with a fellowship. And it was one of the last times he came to the UK, we gave him a fellowship at this college, and his son was there too. And his son reminded me just how much it meant to him. But it's not about what he did for me. To me, enormous as that has been. But it's what he did for America. It's what he did on a global scale. The last physical time we were together was in the French palace with President Macron. He was given the Légion d'honneur by the president. And it was extraordinary because we were told that Macron was supposed to stay and give the honor for about 40 minutes. He was so enamored with this man. He stayed with him for 3 hours. He just didn't want to leave his side. And he mentioned what he'd done for him and for France and for Europe. So of course I'm crestfallen, and I hope to fly to be at the funeral to pay my respects. But in that moment of feeling awful about the loss, I have to feel joy about what he did for me and for literally millions of people around the world. It is a great loss, but also a life so wonderfully lived, so wonderfully inspiring.
Yeah.
The Jesse Jackson legacy, my brother, my friend, my mentor,
Lord Woolley,
will live for a long time.
Sorry to interrupt you, Lord Woolley. We are going to come back to you. We have to take a really short break, but we're going to come back to you. We want to continue our reflections on this icon, this titan of the civil rights movement, the Reverend Jesse Jackson, who has passed away today at the age of 84.
Good morning. We begin with breaking news. The longtime civil rights activist, the Reverend Jesse Jackson, has died at the age of 84. Jesse Jackson's family has released a statement saying the following: "It's with profound sadness that we announce the passing of civil rights leader and founder of the Rainbow Push Coalition, the Honourable Reverend Jesse Louis Jackson Sr. He died peacefully on Tuesday morning, surrounded by his family. His unwavering commitment to justice, equality and human rights helped shape a global movement for freedom and dignity. A tireless change agent, he elevated the voices of the voiceless from his presidential campaigns in the 1980s to mobilising millions to register for votes, leaving an indelible mark on history." Let's bring in Lord Woolley. Lord Woolley, good to have you with us. I just kind of want to pick up on some of those comments that were made in that family's kind of statement there about the legacy that has been left behind. Jesse Jackson's is a name that so many will be aware of, and so many also of that legacy too.
No, an indelible legacy. For me, a personal trauma of losing a friend, a mentor, and as you have said, a true icon. Actually, for millions of people. You know, when you consider when he first ran the presidential race back in 1984, he should have won in 84, he should have won in 88. He was so inspirational, he was so clear-minded about what the nation needed. But even though he knew that he probably wouldn't win, being in the race was the greatest success, because without him, we wouldn't have had a Barack Obama. And I think that message that has stuck with me, and it will stuck with millions of people, about keeping hope alive. Actually, we need those sentiments now more than ever in Jackson's tone. Keep hope alive. I feel blessed that I had such a friend, such a mentor in my life when me and many others started Operation Black Vote. He came to the UK. He helped me register to vote. Literally tens of thousands of people. We would go around in a bus up and down the country, and he was fairly elderly then, but his energy was irrepressible. He would get out the bus, people would crowd around him. He would talk about keep hope alive, register to vote, follow this man, Simon Woolley, follow that man, Lee Jasper. And we literally, Gareth, transformed Westminster, transformed our politics. Because when we started in 1996, there were 4 Black, Asian, minority ethnic MPs. With the help of my brother, this man, we now have over 70. We've had a brown prime minister, we have Black leaders. People feel that this institution belongs to him. It's because of the man on your screen. That man helped transform so many countries around the world, to have that persona, Gareth, that Black is beautiful. I'm a man. I demand to be respected. I demand to have the dignity that every man deserves. And so today is a heartbreaking loss, I must say. But it's also a reminder, Gareth, of what one man can do, what we can do. And that message right now, when so many people feel despair and hopelessness, is a reminder what can be done.
Jesse Jackson was alongside Martin Luther King in 1965 in Selma. He was there in 1968 in Memphis, Tennessee, when Martin Luther King was assassinated. He was there, like you say, in 83 and 88, running for the ticket for the Democrats to become the president, coming third and second, respectively. For you personally, what was it like the first time you shook his hand, the first time you looked him in the eye, considering that body of work, that activism, that tenacity, that drive, that determination, that vision to do what he did? What was it like to see that vision firsthand?
Well, of course, when I first met him, and of course, as a young man, we only seen him on TV, you know, pointing the finger where the shot came across that killed his mentor, Martin Luther King. This was the man who I saw with the big afro hair, the good-looking black man that says, that keep hope alive, yes, we can, that was one of the greatest orators of his generation. And I'm in front of him. And he said to me, Simon, listen, as I have done and learned. You can't be like me. You can only be you. But cherry pick, take what you can from being with me. And so whether it was in the Washington, D.C. or Chicago or Birmingham or Manchester or London, I used to just sit there and watch, listen, and learn. And I said to him in December, in no small measure, the man you hear, we were talking on the phone, the man that you now hear, Brother Jackson, is in no small measure the man that you have helped build. And I promise you this, sir, I said to him, I pledge this to you, that I will endeavor to continue your legacy, how you bring people together, how you inspire a nation to believe that they can be better than they ever thought they could. He gave that to me. Actually, he gave it to millions of people, but I was one of the lucky ones to be mentored by him for 30 years. Of course, I got really lucky because I invited him to become a fellow at my college here in Cambridge University. It was his last visit to the UK. I have a booklet right in front of me, Gareth, Reverend Jesse Jackson, Homerton College, 14th of December, 2021. And I don't know whether you can see the pictures there, me greeting him at the college. A prouder moment I cannot tell you. And that's why today is both a most difficult day, but also a joyous day to have had this man as my friend.
And that visit in 2021 must have been particularly profound, considering that was the year that he had been hospitalised in COVID, 4 years after being diagnosed with Parkinson's, that robbed him of some of his mobility. And when you spoke to him in December, and you talked to him about the fact that you promised and pledged to continue his legacy, and you talked there so eloquently about the fact that he inspired not you, but millions of others, to what sense did you get that he recognised how he was an inspirational leader? To what sense did you ever get that he felt proud of his work, that he felt proud that people were taking on that torch?
I don't know. But I know that he was aware that his life was of giving, of public service, and that that if he could touch someone, if he could inspire a man or a woman, black or white, to want to be a change maker, that I think he felt that his life was worth lived. I know in December, his family thought they were going to lose him. He'd been rushed to hospital and he'd been given the last rites. and we were all preparing for the worst. And then somehow he summoned something that perhaps only Jesse Jackson could. And his sister said, he's not ready to go. He's not ready to go just yet. And although he had difficulty speaking, his mind was razor sharp. And he would either blink or make a noise that he understood. And so to have those moments, thanks to his daughter, Jacqueline, who allowed us to speak for 20 minutes or so, I think I was able to say my goodbye and what he had done for me as a man. And I'm sure many millions of people that will see the news today will reflect on what this man on your screen has done for them and for millions of people.
Lord Woolley, I appreciate that times like these are particularly painful and sensitive, and I appreciate you sharing your relationship and your experiences of Jesse Jackson so closely with us, and thank you for doing so. And, you know, we talk about the legacy, the body of work. For those who, and there will be so many that know him intimately and have followed his life and activism and career and politics, but there'll be those that maybe know of the name Jesse Jackson in a slightly more looser sense.
Yes.
Just talk, if you will, and if you can, about some of that work through the 60s and 80s of the Rainbow Coalition, of the Push Coalition as well, about kind of where the man came from and kind of where this all began, because this is decades worth of difference that he made.
It is.
His beginnings. Just talk to us about those, if you will.
You know, he burst onto the scene as a youth activist, and the greatest civil rights icon, Martin Luther King, spotted his talent. He was an athlete. He was a football player, American football player, but he had this sense of I have a higher calling in life, and so he was brought into the A team of Dr. Martin Luther King, and was mentored and seen as a great activist. Of course, he was there when he was assassinated, but he continued Dr. King's dream, if you like. And the man was so charismatic, fast-talking, caring, evidence-driven. It was just you couldn't quite believe that this man was right in front of you and speaking the way he does, so fast, so eloquent, so powerful, that you kept thinking to yourself, when I grow up, I want to be like him. But he would say to me, Simon, you don't want to be like me. I'm flawed. You want to just be you, he would say to me. And I think beyond the eloquence and the aura, there was great humility, that he's only a man, flawed like all of us, but with something actually unique, that in which he would spend his whole life in service for justice, equality, dignity, for the human spirit. You have to remember, you know, when he brought back the hostages from, I think it was Iran, that were held there was one man who was able to go into in that respect, the lion's den, and speak to what was the enemy and say, look, you're better than this, we're better than this. And he brought those hostages home. Great presence, the biggest heart, and I'm honoured to have said to be his friend.
I'm just reflecting on a quote from Reverend Al Sharpton back in 2017, who said, as I watched him, I thought about the greatness of this man, how he continued Martin Luther King's movement for justice, how he cemented it in the North and made it the King movement truly national. He changed the nation, served in ways he never got credit. No one in our lifetime served longer and stronger. We pray for him because he's given his life for us. And that was the Reverend Al Sharpton reflecting on Jesse Jackson's impact on politics and the wider rights movement back in 2017. And I'm interested in that line, he served in ways he never got credit. What insight into that did you have personally?
Well, I do feel that after that debacle with Barack Obama, that he felt that he never got the true credit that he deserved for the Obama election. I mean, I'm sure the family won't want to delve into that, not right now. But I think Reverend Sharpton, another mentor and friend of mine, is right that he never got the true credit and how he literally transformed America. Of course, the crescendo was the election of Barack Obama, but you couldn't have had Obama without Jackson fighting in 83, 84, and 88, and then lifelong. So it is a recognition today of his legacy, and there'll be millions of people like me who will have been touched by him, who will for sure continue that legacy. And I hope, and I'm sure he's looking down, saying, Brother Woolley and Black nations across the world, white allies across the world, right now, you must know that we're better than this. We're better than the division that has been thrust upon us. Now is the time to dig deep, he would be saying, to mobilize, to show a future in which we can all be proud of. That's what he would be saying. That's what he is saying to us right now as he looks down from his place in heaven, which he has truly deserved.
Friend, mentee of Jesse Jackson, Lord Simon Woolley, I really appreciate you sharing your time and your thoughts with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Let's just take a few moments to remind you of the statement that Jesse Jackson's family released a short while ago. They said, "It is with profound sadness that we announce the passing of civil rights leader and founder of the Rainbow Push Coalition, the Honourable Reverend Jesse Louis Jackson Sr. He died peacefully on Tuesday morning, surrounded by his family. His unwavering commitment to justice, equality and human rights helped shape a global movement for freedom and dignity. A tireless change agent, he elevated the voices of the voiceless from his presidential campaigns in the 1980s to mobilising millions to register to vote, leaving an indelible mark on history." And this was a history that lasted so long. Jesse Jackson, born in 1941, he took his stepfather's name at the age of 15. His work then began in 1960 as one of the Greenville Eight. He read in a segregated library and was arrested for disorderly conduct. It was his first arrest, but by far his last. He joined Martin Luther King in Selma, Alabama at the age of 23 on those marches, and it was there that Martin Luther King recognised the leadership that Jesse Jackson would himself bring. He was there when Martin Luther King was assassinated on April the 4th, 1968 in Memphis, Tennessee. And Jesse Jackson reportedly put his hands in King's blood and wiped those on his clothing, which he wore for days and wore whilst he was on national television recounting the moment of King's assassination. And he began then his own organisations, Operation Push in 1971, the National Rainbow Coalition in 1984, that the two then merged in 1996 to create the Push Rainbow Coalition. His management style at times saw him focus perhaps on the bigger picture and a bit less on the details. But he said, in his own words, "I'm a tree shaker, not a jam maker." He ran for the Democratic nomination for the presidency in both 1983 and 1988, coming third and second, respectively, in those races. He is seen by so many as an inspiration for some of the more modern senators of our time, people like Bernie Sanders and the Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, both of whom have cited Jesse Jackson's work and activism as inspiration for their own. Let's speak to Professor Uzo Iwobi, who's head of Black History Wales and founder of the Welsh Race Council, a specialist policy advisor on equalities to the Welsh Government too. I really appreciate you joining us, Professor. Your reaction to the news we're hearing in the last half an hour?
Absolutely devastated to hear that we have lost such a towering giant in our time. When you think about Reverend Jesse Jackson, you just see him powering down those streets with Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. I mean, his achievements are incredible. He was, for all of us, seen as an international diplomat, a guy who reshaped the politics and civil rights movement, who worked right alongside, I mean, his work around Rainbow Push Coalition, which was, where he championed the voter registration rights and mentored future political leaders, got people on the social justice agenda, on their track. He challenged the establishment. He challenged racial injustice. He called for anti-racism and zero tolerance to racist behaviors and systemic and structural racism. He was one of those greats. And for all of us in the world, we mourn with his family and we celebrate the legacy of such a great and dynamic leader.
And you talk about that structural racism, that racial injustice. It's something that he experienced so personally, a product of, well, the Jim Crow era in the South. He walked for 5 miles past the segregated schools to get to the school that he was allowed to attend at that time. How do you feel that his childhood at that time in South Carolina impacted his work going forwards?
I do believe that, some of the times that we've heard him speak, even when he came to the UK, he said his childhood experiences shaped his determination to continue to protest, campaign, champion, and call for racial justice. I think, when you look at the life of Jesse Jackson, every young person who stands up for anti-racism continues to reference him. They reference Martin Luther King, they reference Mandela, they reference all the people around him. The work that he did, even daring to stand for presidential election, daring to believe that he could be elected, that gave hope, even later on, to Barack Obama and the rest of them. I do think that, something really powerful that I valued about him was his determination never to take no for an answer, never to look at himself and say, it's not possible, or we've done too much, or it's never going to work. Even the death of Martin Luther King Jr. did not deter Jesse Jackson. He continued to fight for racial justice. And for us, even here in Wales, where the Welsh government launched this anti-racist, the zero tolerance policy to racism, the Anti-Racist Wales Action Plan, where we're asking, the former First Minister, Professor Mark Drakeford, said he wants Wales to be an anti-racist nation by 2030. It's all built around this sort of understanding of the need for social justice in our times, for all peoples to sit together on this table of brotherhood, like Martin Luther King said, Black, white, Asian, Eastern European, Gypsy, Roma, travelers, white Welsh people, white English, white Scottish, we are all people. So there needs to be more of a coming together as we lose such a monumental giant. We don't want ever to lose the work that he did, or the boycotts, or the fights for justice and equity. And still today, Black people like us continue to call for fairness, equality. So the work is far from over. But what we can say from the work of Reverend Jesse Jackson is that he was one of the leaders who championed the change that we want to see in our times.
We heard earlier from Lord Simon Woolley, who referenced the friendship and the mentorship that Jesse Jackson provided to him personally over the course of 30 years. Professor, were you able ever to meet Jesse Jackson? And if so, what were those interactions like?
You know, I listened online to one of his presentations, and it was powerful. I think one thing that you got from hearing him was this is a great man. This is a remarkable man. This is a knowledgeable man. You know, sometimes Black people are portrayed like we don't know anything, like we're dunces. But when you heard Reverend Jesse Jackson speak, you knew you stood in a particular space with a man who knew what he was talking about. When you think about him marching, the marching in with Dr. King in Selma, you know, it was incredible. The powerful depiction of his words in Lorraine Motel, where King was assassinated, his reaction to that assassination, how he rallied people to continue to go, and his, flashing on your screen is his very close conversations with Mandela. These are towers of strength for all of us. Even, meetings with leaders, international world leaders. I think for me, something that really struck me was his understanding for international diplomacy. The fact that he knew that he had to interact with world leaders to continue to call for change. We cannot change from just the grassroots. It's going to be top down and bottom up. And he truly understood that. His family referred to him as a servant leader. And for us, that meant that he genuinely approached leadership with humility. He was inspirational. He was dynamic, he was motivational, he was challenging, and he wanted to never stop to call out injustice, no matter the personal cost to himself. So for us, we have a huge, um, you know, huge dynamic platform to stand beside this great giant. And we know that his work will never be forgotten because he truly made radical change. And he was, one of those who the world will always remember as one of the true greats in terms of social justice and racial justice. And I think for all of us who ever heard him either in person or online, um, you were left with no doubt that this was a truly great man. And I know that a number of times, Lord Simon Woolley and I sit on a wonderful platform called that we work with the Home Office at the moment called the Race Equality Engagement Group. I think sitting with under the chairship of Bernice Doreen Lawrence, the work of people like these civil rights greats continue to be at the forefront of our minds. And I think, for us, this is why, even in Wales, we had the gumption to go ahead and begin to look at how we amplify the work of Black creatives. So we recently, in Wales, launched the Black Welsh Music Awards to bring forward the creative excellence of Black artists who many don't even know of, many don't hear of. So my daughter, Ify Wobi, is like a Black musician, and she said, look, we need to have fairness, equity, and highlight all the creatives that are in Wales. And it's people like Jesse Jackson who said it's got to touch all areas of life. It's not just work, it's not just a creative industry, it's not just employment, it's not just health and social care, all aspects of life, there's inequity. And I am a mother of Black children, and I know that they faced racism and racial injustices. And we've had to fight as a family to assert their rights and to challenge racism in all its forms. So Jesse is an absolute champion, an iconic leader, and a man who many will never, ever forget.
You talked about his global diplomacy. We saw those images of him alongside King Charles a short while ago, and we heard from Lord Simon Woolley about the very grassroots level here in the UK in the early 1990s of getting people to register to vote, of getting more Black representation in power and in Parliament. And it strikes me that Jesse Jackson's legacy in the United States is indelible, but that it's not just confined to the United States. That very first-hand impact is so global in its nature and its mark.
It was. And when you look at the reach of international leaders that are prepared to hear from him, walk with him, sit with him, converse with him, it gives you a picture of a fully rounded individual who genuinely cared about equality, about justice, about the eradication of racism, the difference in class, the difference. I mean, this is a man who watched in his time Black people being lynched and hung on trees in the South, in the deep South. It was horrific what they witnessed and how far they have come. But then you think about the way that he spoke up at the death of George Floyd, because nobody could have imagined that despite all that they had all put together and done as a collective of great elders and leaders, that somebody in the 21st century would watch the Black man killed in our very front. It was horrific. It was shocking. He called it out. He condemned it. So for us, our question is, when will Black people, Black, Asian, and minority ethnic people be treated at par with their white counterparts? We need to know that humanity is one race. We need to work together around and sit around this table of brotherhood and sisterhood, like Martin Luther King says. And, for us, thinking about his work, he's not just going to be known for his civil rights work. He's going to be known, like his family said, as a servant leader, a man who influenced and stirred international leaders into action. His political impact was phenomenal. And thinking about his proximity to Martin Luther King Jr., he learned and spoke and campaigned and conversed beside him. He marched in Selma. He was standing in the parking lot of that motel when Dr. King was assassinated in 1968. Like you said, he carried his blood on his clothes for days. And he said it was a transformational and life-changing, significant emotional event for him, which he can never, ever, ever forget. And he stood in that shock and demanded and called for racial justice. He talked about this rainbow collection. In 1984, he founded the National Rainbow Coalition, which later became PUSH, the Rainbow Push, which focused on racial equities for minorities, for women, for diverse ethnic people, etc. And, he didn't stop there. He had his vision. He wanted to be the leader of America. He ran for his own presidential election, though he didn't win, but he built a brilliant coalition of multiracial people, significant delegates within the Democratic Party. He acted as an official international envoy, looking at negotiating the release of different people in Syria. He negotiated in Syria in 1983 the release of Navy LL Robert Goodman in Cuba. He negotiated 22 American citizens release. In Iraq, he negotiated British and American human shields release in Yugoslavia. This is a man who went above and beyond to do what he had to do to bring about racial justice and better treatment for the people in our world. And what an example, what an iconic tower of strength, what an incredible man. And he held on to his Christian faith. I'm a Christian. And so I often think back to the work of the people before me, and the job and the task in front of us as Black people who work in this space. Race Council Cymru, our charity, was established to progress inclusion, cohesion, anti-racism, and to ensure that more and more people are able to access racial justice in the health sector, in the in education, in employment, in leadership, that we see more Black, Asian, and diverse ethnic leaders in this space. And the truth is, the devastating impact of hatred that you suffer for carrying this message. Nobody can tell you. Well, some of our brothers and sisters gave their lives, laid down their lives, had their lives taken for speaking up for racial justice. We are so honored to have had the likes of Jesse Jackson in our world. This is truly contributed to making the world a better place.
Professor Uzo Iwobi joining us, head of Black History Wales, founder of the Welsh Race Council as well. I really appreciate you sharing your time, your thoughts, your insight, comments and reflections that I'm sure so many will be echoing today. You're watching Sky News. A reminder of the breaking news in the past hour. The longtime civil rights activist, the Reverend Jesse Jackson, has died at the age of 84. His family released a statement saying the following: "It is with profound sadness that we announce the passing of civil rights leader and founder of the Rainbow Push Coalition, the Honourable Reverend Jesse Jackson, Sr. He died peacefully on Tuesday morning, surrounded by his family. His unwavering commitment to justice, equality and human rights helped shape a global movement for freedom and dignity. A tireless change agent, he elevated the voices of the voiceless from his presidential campaigns in the 1980s to mobilising millions to register to vote, leaving an indelible mark on history." It's just worth reminding you that there is plenty more on this developing story and on the life and work and impact of Jesse Jackson on the Sky News website and the Sky News app. There's a live page bringing together also the reaction to the news of this Tuesday morning. Well, let's hear from the man himself. One of his most iconic speeches was his 1988 speech at the Democratic National Convention in Atlanta. It was the second unsuccessful run for the Democratic nomination for president, losing out to the Massachusetts governor, Michael Dukakis. But the speech went down in history.
Story. I wasn't always on television. Writers were not always outside my door. When I was born late one afternoon, October 8th, in Greenville, South Carolina, no writers asked my mother her name. Nobody chose to write down our address. A mama was not supposed to make it. And I was not supposed to make it. You see, I was born to a teenage mother who was born to a teenage mother. I understand. I know abandonment and people being mean to you and saying you're nothing and nobody and can never be anything. I understand. Jesse Jackson is my third name. I'm adopted. When I had no name, my grandmother gave me her name. My name was Jesse Burns till I was 12. So I wouldn't have a blank space. She gave me a name to hold me over. I understand when nobody knows your name. I understand when you have no name. I understand. I wasn't born in the hospital. Mama didn't have insurance. I was born in the bed at house. I really do understand. Born in a 3-room house, bathroom in the backyard, slop job by the bed, no hot and cold running water. I understand. Wallpaper used for decoration? No, for a windbreaker. I understand. I'm a working person's person. That's why I understand you, whether you're black or white. I understand work. I was not born with a silver spoon in my mouth. I had a shovel programmed for my hand. My mother, a working woman. So many days she went to work early, with runs in her stockings. She knew better, but she rolled runs in her stockings so that my brother and I could have matching socks and not be laughed at school. I understand. At 3 o'clock on Thanksgiving Day, we couldn't eat turkey because Mama was preparing somebody else's turkey at 3 o'clock. We had to play football to entertain ourselves. And then around 6 o'clock, she would get off the Alta Vista bus, and we would bring up the leftovers and eat our turkey, leftovers, the caucus, the cranberries, around 8 o'clock at night. I really do understand. Every one of these funny labels they put on you, those of you who are watching this broadcast tonight in the projects, on the corners, I understand. Call you outcast, low down, you can't make it, you're nothing, you're from nobody, subclass, underclass. When you see Jesse Jackson, when my name goes in nomination, your name goes in nomination. I was born in the slum, but the slum was not born in me. And it wasn't born in you, and you can make it. Wherever you are tonight, you can make it. Hold your head high. Stick your chest out. You can make it. It gets dark sometimes, but the morning comes. Don't you surrender. Suffering breeds character. Character breeds faith. In the end, faith will not disappoint. You must not surrender. You may or may not get there, but just know that you're qualified, and you hold on and hold out. We must never surrender. America will get better and better. Keep hope alive. Keep hope alive. Keep hope alive. On tomorrow night and beyond. Keep hope alive. I love you very much.
Let's speak to Labour peer Lord Paul Boateng, former civil rights lawyer himself. I can see the reaction on your face. You were a friend of Jesse Jackson's. I appreciate you sharing your time with us here on Sky News. You've just been listening back to that famous speech. How are you feeling?
Sadness, but gratitude for a life well lived, for a man of faith, someone who reached out to us all, whatever our colour, whatever our creed, whatever station in life we were born to. He was the last surviving icon of the civil rights movement. He was with Martin Luther King, Dr. King, on that balcony on the day he was shot. And he reminds us of the importance of activism, of keeping faith alive, keeping hope alive. There would have been no Barack Obama without Jesse Jackson. We owe him not just for the groundbreaking path he took, but for his leadership in so many fields. He was, yes, a civil rights activist, but also he was a great diplomat. He secured the release of countless American hostages the world over. He fought for equal rights for men, for women, for gay people in the workplace. That was part also of his struggle. So he left an indelible mark on our time, and we would not be, any of us, where we are without him. But in our world at this time, in which there is so much a sense of hopelessness and alienation, we need to cling on to his memory. We need to learn the lessons that he taught us and to keep hope alive.
You referenced that there would have been no Obama without Jesse Jackson. It ultimately took 25 years, but that moment did come. And we listened to that speech of 1988. Listening back to that yourself, what did that remind you of the man that you knew, of the man that you met?
He had a power with words, but it was a power that was backed up by authenticity. He knew of what he spoke. He knew about disadvantage. He understood the impact of discrimination. He knew also about not just surviving that, but going on to succeed. And that was a message he shared with the people in my own constituency when he preached many years ago now, way back when in the 80s, in the Harlesden Methodist Church, and talked to a multiracial community in the heart of London, as he did on numerous occasions. He could speak to everyone, and he could bring out the best in us all. And that was his great strength. That was his ability. It wasn't just words. With some people, it's words. But with him, he walked the walk. Didn't just talk the talk, he walked it. And he didn't just walk it for himself. He brought us along with him. And for that, he will always be remembered.
His activism began decades ago. The Greenville 8 was back in 1960. It has been a decades-long struggle for him personally, but then also a mantle that others have picked up and walked with as well. And you yourself made history in May 2002 as the first black cabinet minister here in the United Kingdom. How important for you personally was it to take that light, that flame, that torch, that passion, that advocacy and take it forwards in a personal capacity?
For me, he was always someone, and I mean, I can remember him when I was a schoolboy. So this is the first day in which I have sort of lived and been around as an activist, as a person engaged in the political struggle and the struggle for civil rights myself. This is my first day without knowing that he was there. And that sort of role model, the sort of person who survives all sorts of adversity, and he had a great deal of adversity in his life. He struggled with ill health. He struggled with the targeting of himself and his family by a hostile media and a hostile state. Yes, he was rightly honored in his time, but he was also subject to a great deal of discrimination, and he suffered. But he came through it all, as did his family, and my heart goes out to his wife, to the children at this time, because they went through it too. But they should know, as your coverage today on Sky demonstrates all too clearly, that he did not live the life he lived. He didn't make the sacrifices he did in vain, that he touched all our hearts. He made a difference to our world. And I believe he will go on making a difference through his memory, through his words, and through his example of survival, of struggle, but always faith and hope. That's what our world needs, never more than at this time.
Yes, and that faith and hope that the world needs never more so than at this time, as you say. We talk so frequently at the moment about division, about friction, about disorder and chaos at the most basic levels of society. How will the words, the work of Jesse Jackson, how will that be able to be applied to what we're facing now and what we will face as well in the future going forwards?
That's a very good question. And I think the answer lies in Jesse's always reminding everybody. And I mean, I've seen him speak to children, my own children included, to older people, to people at the start of their working lives, in the middle and at the end of their lives. And what he always said, and it's true, you know, was that it's no use just sort of blaming it on other people. We have to take responsibility ourselves and be the agents of our own liberation. No one's going to do it for us. We have to assume responsibility. We have to take on board our obligation to lead lives in which we take responsibility for ourselves, we reach out to others, together we work to make our world better. And that was what he always did. And, you know, he began this concept of the Rainbow Coalition. of people of different genders, different races, different sexuality, different creeds, different beliefs, but recognizing a shared and common humanity and taking responsibility for living that out in their own lives. And it's not just about politics, it's about how we behave in our homes, how we behave in our community, how we behave in our workplace, and how we relate to one another. And that Jesse always did in a way that was respectful of difference, that was inclusive. He relished debate and discussion, and he accepted that there would be opposing views. And he took those views on, but always he had the compass of faith and moral responsibility. And I think that's what we need at this time. All of us have something to offer. All of us need to have a moral compass to do the right thing and to take responsibility for that. And that's how Jesse Jackson was able to mobilize corporate America, the corporations globally, to do the right thing in terms of inclusivity and equal opportunity. That's how he was able to persuade people who had taken hostages to give them up. That's why he was able to meet with peoples of so many different backgrounds and faiths and beliefs, and somehow find a common place which we could all occupy together. We live in a polarized world today. Jesse always sought to reduce polarization and bring people together, not just through words, but through action. And that's what we can all do. And that's what gives me hope. And I think that is our best hope. And Jesse Jackson represented the very best in our world, in our time.
Lord Boateng, Paul Boateng, Labour peer, friend of Jesse Jackson as well. I really appreciate you sharing your time with us here on Sky News. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Just want to take a few moments to bring you a reaction now, a tribute from Al Sharpton on the news of the passing of Jesse Jackson, who has died this morning at the age of 84. Writing from New York, the Reverend Sharpton says, "Today I lost the man who first called me into purpose when I was just 12 years old, and our nation lost one of its greatest moral voices." The Reverend Dr. Jesse Louis Jackson was not simply a civil rights leader, he was a movement unto himself. He carried history in his footsteps and hope in his voice. One of the greatest honours of my life was learning at his side. He reminded me that faith without action is just noise. He taught me that protest must have purpose, that faith must have feet, and that justice is not seasonal, it is daily work. Al Sharpton going on to say, in 1969, when I was still a teenager trying to find my place in this struggle, Reverend Jackson appointed me youth director of the Brooklyn branch of Operation Breadbasket, the economic arm of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, funded and founded by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He trusted me with responsibility and saw something in me before I fully saw it in myself. That is the measure of a true mentor. They do not just teach you, they name you. But to me, he was more than a public figure. He was godfather to my two daughters. He prayed over them as infants. He spoke life into them as young girls. We stood in his home not as a headline, but as a family. He taught them and me that trying is just as important as triumph, that you do not wait for the dream to come true, you work to make it real. Because of him, I learned that leadership is not about being seen, it is about seeing others. Because of him, I learned that our lives mean the most when they are spent widening the circle of who belongs. Al Sharpton going on to say in his tribute following the news that Jesse Jackson has passed at the age of 84. The Reverend Jackson stood wherever dignity was under attack, from apartheid abroad to injustice at home. His voice echoed in boardrooms and in jail cells. His presence shifted rooms. His faith never wavered. And going on to say, and finally, today we mourn, but we do not retreat. We pray for the Jackson family to carry the torch. The greatest way to honour Jesse Jackson is not in memory alone, but in movement. He taught us to keep marching. He taught us to keep organising. He taught us that justice is never given, it is demanded. That was Al Sharpton reacting to the death of Jesse Jackson. Well, earlier I spoke to Lord Woolley, who founded and was director of Operation Black Vote.
As you have said, a true icon, actually for millions of people. You know, when you consider when he first ran the presidential race back in 1984. He should have won in 84. He should have won in 88. He was so inspirational. He was so clear-minded about what the nation needed. But even though he knew that he probably wouldn't win, being in the race was the greatest success, because without him, we wouldn't have had a Barack Obama. And I think that message that has stuck with me, and it will stuck with millions of people, about keeping hope alive. Actually, we need those sentiments now more than ever in Jackson's tone. Keep hope alive. I feel blessed that I had such a friend, such a mentor in my life when me and many others started Operation Black Vote. He came to the UK. He helped me register to vote. Literally tens of thousands of people. We would go around in a bus up and down the country, and he was fairly elderly then, but his energy was irrepressible. He would get out the bus, people would crowd around him. He would talk about keep hope alive, register to vote, follow this man, Simon Woolley, follow that man, Lee Jasper. And we literally, Gareth, transformed Westminster, transformed our politics. Because when we started in 1996, there were 4 Black, Asian, minority ethnic MPs. With the help of my brother, this man, we now have over 70. We've had a brown prime minister, we have Black leaders. People feel that this institution belongs to him. It's because of the man on your screen. That man helped transform so many countries around the world, to have that persona, Gareth, that Black is beautiful. I'm a man. I demand to be respected. I demand to have the dignity that every man deserves. And so today is a heartbreaking loss, I must say. But
Jesse Jackson.
It's also a reminder, Gareth, of what one man can do, what we can do. And that message right now, when so many people feel despair and hopelessness, is a reminder what can be done.
Jesse Jackson was alongside Martin Luther King in 1965 in Selma. He was there in 1968 in Memphis, Tennessee, when Martin Luther King was assassinated. He was there, like you say, in 83 and 88, running for the ticket for the Democrats to become the president, coming 3rd and 2nd, respectively. For you personally, what was it like the first time you shook his hand, the first time you looked him in the eye, considering that body of work, that activism, that tenacity, that drive, that determination, that vision to do what he did? What was it like to see that vision firsthand?
Well, of course, when I first met him, and of course, as a young man, we only seen him on TV, you know, pointing the finger where the shot came across that killed his mentor, Martin Luther King. This was the man who I saw with the big Afro hair, the good-looking Black man that says that keep hope alive. Yes, we can. That was one of the greatest orators of his generation. And I'm in front of him. And he said to me, Simon, listen, as I have done, and learn. You can't be like me. You can only be you. But cherry pick, take what you can from being with me. And so whether it was in the Washington, D.C., or Chicago, or Birmingham, or Manchester, or London, I used to just sit there and watch, listen, and learn. And I said to him in December, in no small measure, the man you hear, we were talking on the phone, the man that you now hear, Brother Jackson, is in no small measure the man that you have helped build. And I promise you this, sir, I said to him, I pledge this to you, that I will endeavour to continue your legacy.
Lord Simon Woolley there reflecting on the life and work of Jesse Jackson, who has died at the age of 84. His family released a statement earlier this morning. There is more details, more reaction, more insight into his life on the Sky News website and the Sky News app as well. A live page running there, including reaction from civil rights leader Al Sharpton, who's among the first to pay tribute to Jesse Jackson. They worked closely during the civil rights era, and he said that Jesse Jackson was not simply a civil rights leader, he was a movement unto himself, carrying history in his footsteps and hope in his voice. One of the greatest honours of my life was learning at his side. He reminded me that faith without action is just noise. He taught me that protest must have purpose, that faith must have feet, and that justice is not seasonal, it is daily work. Al Sharpton going on to say he trusted me with responsibility and saw something in me before I fully saw it in myself. That is the measure of a true mentor. They do not just teach you, they name you. You're watching Sky News, reflecting on the life and work of Jesse Jackson, who has died at the age of 84. Very good morning. It is 11 o'clock, continuing our coverage with the tributes to Reverend Jesse Jackson, the long-time civil rights campaigner who has died aged 84. His activism spanned decades. He worked alongside the likes of Martin Luther King Jr. and included 2 runs for the Democratic presidential nomination in the 1980s.
I was not born with a silver spoon in my mouth. I had a shovel program for my hand. My mother, a working woman. Some of the days she went to work early, with runs in her stockings. She knew better, but she rolled runs in her stockings so that my brother and I could have matching socks and not be laughed at school. I understand. At 3 o'clock on Thanksgiving Day, we couldn't eat turkey because Mama was preparing somebody else's turkey at 3 o'clock. We had to play football to entertain ourselves. And then around 6 o'clock, she would get off the Alta Vista bus, and we would bring up the leftovers and eat our turkey, leftovers, the caucus, the cranberries, around 8 o'clock at night. I really do understand. Every one of these funny labels they put on you, those of you who are watching this broadcast tonight in the projects, on the corners, I understand. Call you outcast, low down, you can't make it, you're nothing, you're from nobody, subclass, underclass. When you see Jesse Jackson, when my name goes in nomination, your name goes in nomination. I was born in the slum, but the slum was not born in me. And it wasn't born in you, and you can make it. Wherever you are tonight, you can make it. Hold your head high. Stick your chest out. You can make it. It gets dark sometimes, but the morning comes. Don't you surrender. Suffering breeds character. Character breeds faith. In the end, faith will not disappoint. You must not surrender. You may or may not get there, but just know that you're qualified and you hold on and hold out. We must never surrender. America will get better and better. Keep hope alive.
Jesse Jackson may have came second in that Democratic race, but he came first for so many throughout the course of so many decades. And his family released this following statement saying, "It is with profound sadness that we announce the passing of civil rights leader and founder of the Rainbow Push Coalition, the Honourable Reverend Jesse Louis Jackson Sr. He died peacefully on Tuesday morning, surrounded by his family. His unwavering commitment to justice, equality and human rights helped shape a global movement for freedom and dignity. A tireless change agent, he elevated the voices of the voiceless from his presidential campaigns in the 80s to mobilising millions to register to vote, leaving an indelible mark on history. One of his last major appearances was at the Democratic National Convention in Chicago in the summer of 2024. He received a standing ovation as he was wheeled onto stage. Let's take a look at that moment.
Please welcome founder and president of the Rainbow Push Coalition, Reverend Jesse Jackson.
The reaction there to the arrival of Jesse Jackson in 2024 at the Democratic National Convention. Joining us on the line is our US correspondent David Blevins. And David, just talk to us about not just 2024, but a lifetime's worth of impact on American society.
Well, it has just gone 6 o'clock in the morning on the East Coast, so the United States of America will waken to the news that it has lost one of the most significant figures in American civil rights history. Jesse Jackson rose to prominence as an aide of Martin Luther King Jr., witnessed his assassination. He became one of the most visible advocates of racial equality in this nation. As you know, he ran for president twice, in 84 and 88, changing the politics of America forever. Many people would argue that he was the person who paved the way for the election of Barack Obama many decades later. And really, he had been shaped by his upbringing, because Jesse Jackson grew up in the little town of Greenville in North Carolina. He was born way back in 1941, the son of a teenage mother, a single mother. His father was an older married neighbor. And he grew up in a deeply segregated southern community, facing so much discrimination through his life. He often recalled watching white school children ride school buses while he had to walk to school. But he was an absolute standout student, the class president, quarterback of the high school football team. So he won a place at the University of Illinois on a football scholarship. That's how he managed to find his way there. And that's where really his love of politics began. He eventually transferred to North Carolina State University, which is a historically black college, but it was there really that the civil rights movement was born.
And talk to us then about the impact, because you say that civil rights movement was born, but then it flourished, it brought about change, it brought about activism, it brought about the America that many know today, and the movement that continues to this day.
Well, he had journeyed alongside Martin Luther King, who had a significant influence on his life. So following the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr., Jesse Jackson formed the National Rainbow Push Coalition in 1984. That was an organization that really advocated for the marginalized, black Americans, for women, for the LGBTQ plus community, Native Americans, Hispanics, and all of that fueled his aspirations within the Democratic Party. And really the culmination of that civil rights movement was in 1984 when he launched a campaign for the White House, a campaign that expanded political participation really among black and younger voters. And in 1988, he came remarkably close to winning. He had already won several primaries, so that's what made him the first serious black contender for president. And I think it's worth pointing out that even after all of that, he negotiated the release of prisoners or hostages in places like Syria and Cuba and Iraq. And those efforts, to some extent, I think, demonstrated the influence of the civil rights leadership globally. And that is why we are hearing the kind of words we're hearing this morning from his family and from the Reverend Al Sharpton about the influence Jesse Jackson had, not just on America, but globally.
David Blevins, our US correspondent.